Hello everybody, and welcome to another installment of RN Cliff Notes. All right, thanks a lot for joining us. Thank you for liking, and especially thank you for subscribing and becoming a member of the tribe, right? Note taker tribe. All right, so what are we doing today? At RN Cliff Notes, we are teaching you about the endocrine system, the anatomy and physiology. And we want to go just a little bit deeper this time, right? And make sure that you retain this information. By the way, at RN Cliff Notes, what are we doing? Helping students to see through larger concepts. And when we say helping you to see through larger concepts, what we mean by that is that we're teaching you study smart strategies. Can't emphasize that enough. Study smart strategies, right? So you've been in situations where you sat in class and you maybe listened to PowerPoint presentations and things like that, but then the information doesn't stick. Why? There wasn't a study smart strategy attached to it. That makes all the difference in the world, right? Okie dokie. So here we go. All right, so we're numbering our paper, our device from 1 to 10. And we want you to take your best shot at this, right? And when you're doing this, it's really important that you kind of try to zero in on the different structures and what they're actually pointing to. Okay, so here we go. All right, so 1 through 10. So 1, just to emphasize, just in case it's a little difficult to see, 1 is pointing to the posterior of this person's head, right? 2 is pointing in front of that structure, towards the front, but it's in a superior position. 3 comes down to here, all right? So it's got a pointer, and then that pointer splits into 2 right here at the neck. 4 is here, behind the sternum, okay? 5 is this organ going in a transverse fashion here in the abdomen. 6, right? And the lower aspect of the pubic area there. 7 is pointing just under where number 2 is, right? And more so of an anterior position, but under whatever number 2 as a structure is. All right, 8 is pointing here, right across from where 3 is, but we notice that 3 split, right? It's split. It's pointing at 2 sections at once. And then 8 is pointing at its own part right there. So that's 8, okay? 9 is pointing at these 2 structures at the top of the kidney. So 9 is pointing to both of those. 10 is pointing to this structure here, right? In the pubic pelvic area. All right. So what were we getting at with that? The location of our glands and structures. So let's jump right in. And what we're going to find is that we're going to follow the same sequence as we cover the glands and structures, okay? So here we go. All right, so number 1 should have been, right? You should have put pineal gland. Pineal gland. That's a special word. Now, when they say pineal gland, they're gonna be referring to this structure that looks like it's about the size of a pea, but it's shaped like a pine cone, kind of, right? Pineal gland. Good. All right. Number 2. Structure number 2 is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus. Okay? So now, just to put the hypothalamus in perspective, notice that the hypothalamus is above another structure. And that other structure is the pituitary gland. By the way, if my fist was the hypothalamus, right? Then the pituitary gland would be the handles on the scissors that you see here. So, and this is the way it actually looks. So a hypothalamus, and then your pituitary looks like it's hanging outside of the hypothalamus. And your pituitary has 2 parts. It has the anterior aspect of it and the posterior aspect of it. So that's what it looks like. Hypothalamus, pituitary, but 2 parts of the pituitary, anterior and posterior. Okay, good. All right, now, So that was number 2. Number 3. Number 3 is splitting and pointing at 2 different things. All right, that's parathyroid. And if you watched one of our previous segments, we talked about how the parathyroid, right? Those are the little pearls behind your actual thyroid gland. And we also talked about how anytime you need a thyroidectomy and the doctor needs to surgically remove your thyroid, then many times they accidentally remove your parathyroids as a matter of fact as well. Okay? So your 2 pairs of parathyroid. So there's 4 little pearls behind your thyroid, parathyroid. We're coming back to that. All right, then. So that was number 3. Number 4 would be the thymus. Okay, now, as we're talking about the thymus, it's really important that we bring some clarity to this. So there's lots of people that when you ask them, like, oh, point to your thymus, right? They go, all right, and point to their neck. They're confusing it with the thyroid. Thyroid, right, here in your neck region, but your thymus is actually in your mediastinum here, right? Mediastinum. For those that don't know, media, right, middle, sternum, sternum. So your mediastinum, right behind your sternum bone, that's where your thymus hangs out, all right? So we're going to come back to that and give you a good bit of insight about that. All right, now, next, all right, so we're at number 5, and that would be the pancreas. The pancreas, right, runs kind of transverse across your abdomen there. All right, and we'll get back to that and talk about the different cells and things. Then the testes, right, which would be gonads for males. All right, so we've got 1 through 6 there. Pineal, hypothalamus, parathyroid, thymus, pancreas, and testes. Now to the other side. Number 7 would be the pituitary, as we demonstrated earlier, right? Pituitary hanging out of the hypothalamus, right, with its 2 parts. Then we've got the thyroid. And of course, note that the thyroid is pointing right in this region where the parathyroid is. And we already understand that the parathyroids are located behind the thyroid. Then after that, the adrenals. The adrenals are pointing to the top of your kidneys. And for those of you who've been with us in the other segments, you already understand what that's about. And if you haven't noticed it yet or you haven't watched that video, I strongly encourage you to go check out our neurotransmitter video that goes into quite a bit of detail about that, right? Check that out. All right. After the adrenals, then we have the ovaries. I know. You know, how you're going to have, right, testicles and ovaries pictured on the guy. I mean, hey, you know, this is, you know, an educational thing. So, yeah. So, yeah, testicles on one side, what? Gonads for males. And for females, gonads would be, right? So I've kind of pushed that in there. It would be ovaries. Ovaries are gonads for females. All right, good. So we got it. All right, now, moving on. So like we said, we're going to cover these in that same order we just did it. So number 1, the pineal gland. And here's a picture of where the pineal gland sits, right? Towards the posterior aspect of the brain, located in between the 2 hemispheres. And here's that little pea shape, right? That I was telling you about, pea size. And it kind of resembles a pine cone, right, in its shape. All right. So, yeah. Now, the pineal gland, associated with melatonin. And many of you are familiar with melatonin in terms of that's what helps you to sleep better. And so your pineal gland is associated with maintaining the levels of melatonin in your body, okay? Yeah, but for some people who don't get enough sleep, right, that's why you're sleeping, that more of that melatonin can get produced. If you have difficulty sleeping, you can get a supplement of melatonin, and for some people it works fantastic, right? Good. So that's number 1. Number 2, the hypothalamus. Now, what I want to illustrate to you is that come test time, you get asked, like, what's the master gland, what's the master structure? And people mix that up because they're seeing that word master over and over again. But the way this goes is the hypothalamus is not a gland. It's not. It's a part of the neural system and it kind of plays a role in the endocrine system, well, a huge role. But by the same token, it is not a gland. So it is a master what? Structure. The master gland is actually the pituitary. But the pituitary answers to the hypothalamus, right? Okay, so the master structure, what? Hypothalamus. All right, moving on. Then number 3 in our list was the parathyroids. And what I want to point out to you, right, is what we have. 2 pairs of parathyroids. These little pearls located what? In the rear of the thyroid gland, right? In the posterior aspect. So we've got our outline of the thyroid, and our thyroid's connected by this isthmus, a connecting point in between 2 things. And some of you may have seen that before in geography, an isthmus between maybe 2 continents, a connecting point, or between 2 islands. So an isthmus, right? All right. Now, number 4, the thymus. So we said it's mediastinum, right? Located in the mediastinal area. So there it is behind the breastbone, and it contributes to immunity. Okay. Now let's break something down to you. So kind of fast forward to our immunity segment that we're going to do. But let's go ahead and go there. So now notice with thymus, I made the T off of thymus what? Red. Because that's where T cells get their name from, here. When cells are formed, generally many cells come from your bones, especially your long bones like your femur, right? So you've got cells that originate there that contribute to what? Immunity. Now the issue becomes, yes, that cell was what? Created or born in your bone, long bones like that, your femur, especially in locations like the end caps of your bone, which we call anybody know? The what? The epiphysis. The epiphysis of the bone, the top of the bone, the bottom of the bone. That's where blood and cells are produced, right? Okay, so when it comes to T cells, although they were produced originally in the bone, they migrated and finished maturing in the thymus, and they became T cells. But then there was another type of cell, what? The B cells. And the B cells, they originated in the bone and never left. And that's why they're called what? B, bone. Bone, B cells. That's how they got the name B cells. So we named them according to where they finished maturing. B cells finish maturing where? In the bone. T cells finish maturing where? In the thymus. All right. Excellent. Excellent. Okie dokie. And by the way, one of the things that we could stand to infuse more in these discussions is the impact on the elderly. Unfortunately, as you hear some of these misnomer type of statements about the elderly, where maybe you've heard somebody say, if you live long enough, you'll wind up with cancer. It's kind of a crude thing to say. But unfortunately, there's a bit of truth in that, right? What's happening to the elderly person? Their thymus is shrinking. The older you get, the more your thymus shrinks. And the more your thymus shrinks, it's going to develop less T cells. Now, T cells, their role was to kill on sight any cell that seemed to be misshapen, right? Or growing out of proportion, or becoming too old, right? T cells would just kill that cell. And in killing that cell, greatly reducing the odds of you developing cancer. So unfortunately for elderly folks, right? What? As that shrinks, yikes. What happens? Less T cells, less defense against things like cancer, right? Okie dokie. So anyway, moving on to 5. Now, special note to you teachers out there, all right, that are watching this video. Do not let your students laugh at my pancreas. I mean, Hey, all right, yeah. So anyway, shame. Shame on us. We're back. So the pancreas. All right. So we know that in the pancreas, it's responsible for maintenance of blood glucose, right? All right, now, how does it do that? So it does that with alpha cells. Alpha cells produce glucagon, all right? And beta cells produce insulin. But now, this is Cliff Notes. So the idea is we want to come away with steady, smart strategies, right? So here we go. In maintaining that blood glucose. So notice we highlighted the letter A. Why? When it comes to insulin or glucagon, which one has the letter A in it? Alpha cells? Glucagon does. Glucagon is secreted from alpha cells. Then we have beta cells. B for what? Bringing glucose into the cell. Wait a minute. So this is our Cliff Notes. So we're going deeper. Okay. Now what I want you to do is write this down or type this in. The word in, I-N, right? Dash, cell, C-E-L-L, dash, the word in again, I-N. So you should have wrote or typed in, cell, in, insulin. Ah, okay, all right. This is the way we break it down in Cliff Notes style. Insulin. That medication, insulin, that's exactly what it does. Insulin acts like a key, and it opens cells up and allows things to be transported into the cell. Things like what? Glucose. Okay? All right, let's get a scenario and make sure this sticks with us. So you have a patient whose blood glucose is, let's say the blood sugar is 260, right? Then we give them insulin. Then we recheck their blood sugar in 15 minutes. 15 minutes pass by. We check their blood sugar again. Whoa, wait a minute, it dropped. It dropped tremendously, right? Now it's 150. From 260 to 150, where'd the sugar go? Did it disappear? No. You gave them insulin, and that allowed the sugar to go inside the cells and have the cells use that glucose. Insulin. By the way, let's go a little deeper than that. So we get it. Sugar transported into the cell as a result of what? Being invited in, having the door unlocked to the cells, using insulin. Let's take that from a different tack. You could have a patient who has too high a level of potassium, right? And we want that potassium level to drop in terms of their blood. We give them insulin, and what happens? The potassium goes inside the cell just like the sugar would. And now you retest that person's ECF, extracellular, right, level of potassium, and what happens? It dropped. Why did it drop? A good bit of the potassium went into the cell. And if you watch some of our previous videos, particularly the ones on fluid and electrolytes, where you see the cell pictured, and we're talking about the sodium-potassium pump and the Pisces concept that I shared with you guys, right? So potassium wants to go into the cell anyway. All you have to do is give that person insulin and unlock the door. Potassium will gladly go into the ICF, into the cell, right? Yeah. Okay, make sure you check that out. That's important to know, especially for those of you studying on the RN level and above. Have to know that, right? Because potassium is critical to our cardiac health. And a person's potassium's too high, you can start to see wacky changes in their EKG, right? And they could have heart issues, angina, things like that. And that dose of insulin could save the day, right? But if you don't understand that, and you see that scenario in NCLEX, you'll be completely lost without that understanding, okay? Real important, in, cell, in. Not just glucose, but other things that can go what? In the cell. Potassium, namely. All right. So anyway, so what we say? Alpha cells, glucagon, the one with A in it. Beta cells, right? What? Bring glucose what? Into the cell. Utilizing what? The insulin that beta cells produce. So beta cells, insulin. Got it. All right, moving on. The testes. Testes produce testosterone. Okay, so we said the male hormone, right? Produced out of the gonads from males. Testes. All right. Now, 7. 7 is the pituitary itself. And we said the pituitary, right? What did we say about it? It had the two aspects, anterior pituitary, posterior pituitary, and you can kind of see there, right? The little segments there. Anterior and posterior pituitary. Hanging from the, what's this area that is hanging from again? The hypothalamus, right? And the pituitary, we said, is the master gland. But even though it's the master gland, it answers to the master structure from the neurological system, the hypothalamus. All right, good. Moving on. Number 8. This time, right, because we saw this shape before, but we were looking at it from the rear view. This time, we're looking at it from the anterior or front view, right, as we're talking about the thyroid. And the key takeaway here is that your thyroid is the gland that's producing the hormone that's responsible for metabolism. And we all know about metabolism. The higher your metabolism, right, the thinner your body frame. Why? Because you got a high metabolism. And those people make us sick, don't they? Isn't that right? Oh my God. If people can sit around and eat pizza and honey buns and all this stuff that don't gain any weight, like, then they complain about it. That makes it even worse. Like, I can't gain weight. Like, you are doing all the wrong things. All right? Okay. Anyway. So, right? Then a person with slow metabolism, what? Larger body type. Okay? And in this segment of endocrine, we're going to go in on that. We are really going to go deep with that just to make sure that you fully understand those disease processes. That is such a testable item when it comes time for NCLEX, progression exams, exit exams, however you want to say that, right? And testing in nursing school. Got to know those disease processes for endocrine. And you are watching the right series about that. We're going to get you together when it comes to that completely. Okay? So thyroid, metabolism. All right, now, from the thyroid though, let's go a little deeper. We've got T3, right? So it secretes T3 and T4. Now, this is going to sound complicated at first, but it's not. Bear with me. T3 and T4. I want to point out to you that this is a very funky looking 4. Yes, it is, but for a reason. All right, we'll get there. So, next thing we want to look at, T3. 3. What does 3 mean? Tri. Right? So T3, triiodothyronine. That is a fantastic word to, like, right? That just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Triiodothyronine. I love that one. Right? Okay. T3 is what that one is. T4, thyroxine. Okay. So here's why the 4 looked funky. Okay? So T4, what I do in my mind, when I see thyroxine, I take that letter X and I turn it and I think to myself that it looks to me like the building of a 4, like you're putting the number 4 together, right? Because right off of that number X, you just, right, complete the number 4, like we did here. So triiodothyronine and what? Thyroxine. Using that X to help you complete the number 4. Okay, there we go. All right, now, a little bit more with this. So number 9, the adrenals. The adrenals. Now, like I said, previous video, we went in on that part about the adrenals, right? We went there. This time, we want to step it up, right? So we want to talk about the 4 chief hormones that are produced by your adrenals. And we also want to separate them out in terms of what part of the actual adrenals produce the hormones, right? Because you got to know that too. And that really doesn't matter like what level program you're at, whether LPN, RN, right? Either one of those programs and above expect you to know like the separated parts and what hormones are produced from the separated parts of the adrenals. So here we go. All right. Now, as we separate out the parts, notice we have the adrenal cortex. Now, real important that you realize cortex sounds like covering, cortex. So the cover is the adrenal cortex. Then there's the adrenal medulla. Now, just flow with that word, medulla, middle, right? So the adrenal medulla is where? In the middle. And we saw that concept before when we were in the neuro section, and we said that there was a part of that called the medulla oblongata. What? The medulla oblongata, the middle part between the cerebrum, right, and your spinal cord. The middle, the medulla oblongata. And in this case, what? Adrenal medulla in the middle of the adrenal gland. Okie dokie. Now, going a little deeper. So the adrenal cortex, now we want to emphasize that court. Just like you used to seeing in medications, right? But your body produces these things naturally, but they're man-made or synthetic versions of these things. So court, right? You're used to seeing cortisone that you can buy from the store, right? But your body here in the adrenal cortex, cortisol is made. Cortisol, your stress hormone, right? And for those of you who are in school, right, when you've heard of people talk about the freshman 15 pounds, right? You start school and you got these back-to-back exams and, oh man, essay papers due and case studies and all that stuff's due, and you start putting on weight in school, and you're like, oh man, I'm exercising, but the weight's not going away. Why? Because the stress is not going away. This is a stress-related hormone. So many times I have students looking forward to graduating. You graduate, get the hair and nails done, and they finally get to shave off those pounds and come back and visit the school and talk to the students, right? Yeah, right? Yeah, I call it the victory lap. Come on back and tell people about, your success story. Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, you can drop weight. Why? After school, when you're not stressed anymore and the stress hormone's gone. All right? Then now, in addition to cortisol, there's aldosterone. Okay, so now we're going to have a little wordplay. And so when we say aldosterone, that's one of those things that you could know it today and forget it tomorrow. But if you handle it Cliff Note style, you know it for good. Here we go. When I say aldosterone, right? When you hear aldosterone, here's what I want you to think. All that salt. All right, so say it with me. Aldosterone, all that salt. That salt. It's okay, we're learning here, okay? All that salt, that's right. So, right, this is the hormone that helps to retain salt, helps to keep your body to retain salt, especially in your kidneys. Hang on to more salt. Why? Because aldosterone was secreted, right? Salt related. But now, hold it. We know that there's a classification of medications known as what? Corticosteroids. So the man-made version of parts of these guys, corticosteroids. Okay, great. All right, now, going a little bit further, we've got the adrenal medulla. So from the middle, and it's very interesting that from the medulla, right, the medulla is usually, like we learned in neuro, like an important space where really important things happen. And in this case, yes, we see it again, right? Adrenal medulla, what's produced there? Epinephrine. Epinephrine. By the way, what's epinephrine's other name? And you say adrenaline. Yes, adrenaline. Good. Adrenaline, epinephrine. Interchangeable, right? Then we've got norepinephrine or noradrenaline. Okay, good. Now, we already know about epi. Okay, epi what? Speed your heart rate up, raise your blood pressure, these kinds of things. Yes. And we also learned about norepinephrine in our neurotransmitter series. Also a part of your flight and fight response, your flight or fight response, and tends to cause a peripheral vasoconstriction. But if we're given that in terms of a medication like Levophed, we got to watch out, right? Because we could overdo that and cut off circulation to digits, to fingers and toes. So we don't want to go too far with Levophed, which is the synthetic version of norepinephrine, right? Great. Okay. Now, that brings us to 10, the ovaries. So the ovaries produce progesterone and estrogen. All right, so we said the female gonads, right? Progesterone and estrogen. And we know the role that they play, all right, in terms of fertility and things like that. Okay, so now additional sites that weren't on our map that we started with. Additional things, ADH, antidiuretic hormone. Boy, do we have a lot to learn about that. That is an all-time favorite on the NCLEX. We've got to straighten that out for you, right? And take a look at different osmolalities. Osmolality of blood, osmolality of urine, as it relates to ADH. We're going to knock that out. You're going to learn all about that in this series. Okay? Then there's growth hormone, right? All right? Then prolactin, all right? And oxytocin. So we see which parts of the body these hormones impact. So your antidiuretic hormone impacting what? Your kidney, water status, right? Growth hormone impacting your bones and your muscles, right? And people who don't have a high enough level of growth hormone tend to suffer from dwarfism, right? Things like that, little people. And prolactin, right? For lactating mothers, things like that. Then oxytocin, let's try that out. So oxytocin, what is the synthetic version of oxytocin? What is it called as a medication? And you say, right, what? Pitocin, good, right? Impacts a woman's uterus. Okie dokie. So, good job, guys. Good. It's a fair amount of information. So you got a good handle on this, good job. If not, what? Watch the video again. Right? Yeah. Okay. The end. Hey, thanks again, guys, for subscribing and liking, right? And especially you subscribers, welcome to the tribe. Okay? Note takers, thanks for joining the family. We'll see you guys next time.